All right, joining me now here on the Matthew Filipowicz Show is Dave Saldana. Dave is an Emmy Award-winning journalist and filmmaker who has also written for Alternate and Huffington Post. For the Center for Media and Democracy, he wrote and directed the new film Keystone PipeLies Exposed, which you can find at pipeliesexposed.org. Dave, thank you so much for being on the show.
Pleasure to be here, Matt.
All right, so Dave, at the website, which is pipeliesexposed.org, you actually have this really, really great 30-minute or so documentary on the proposed Trans-Canada Keystone XL pipeline. And again, I love the idea and the way the website's laid out with actually talking about the actual lies about this proposed pipeline. Let's get right to that. Let's talk about, I think you have like maybe 6 or 7 big lies that the pipeline has. Talk about the big lies that Trans-Canada and its proponents are pushing forward.
Well, the first one is it's really a bait and switch for the American people, and then they're talking about jobs. And from the outset, they've tossed around numbers like 10,000, 20,000, 50,000, 100,000, 120,000 jobs that are going to be created by this pipeline. And what we found is that when the initial report came out that was touting numbers like 120,000, it was by a company that was bought and paid for by TransCanada. So those numbers were grossly inflated, so much so that when the Cornell Global Labor Institute investigated those claims, they found them to be, quote, unsubstantiated, right? Which means they just made them up. There was no, There were no facts behind it. What we trust is the U.S. State Department, which in the report that just came out a few weeks ago and strongly supports and pushes for the pipeline, even that report, another company bought and paid for by TransCanada, says maximum 35 full-time jobs, 15 contract jobs. So at most, there will be 50 long-term jobs coming out of this project. Now, during the construction, there will be about 3,900 construction jobs. There will be some ancillary jobs, but long-term, 50 jobs. So that's lie number one.
Let's go down the list, man. Yeah, because these things are all infuriating and again so blatantly obvious lies, which are just, which again makes this whole project so ridiculous. Let's go on to the other one, which is the effect on the economy.
Right. There's talk about how this will mean lower gas prices for American consumers. Fact is, for a lot of consumers, it's going to mean higher gas prices. And that seems counterintuitive, but let me explain. Right now, there are pipelines from Alberta, Canada, and they go into the Midwest. There are a couple in Illinois, there's one in Detroit, and there are some in Oklahoma. And those pipelines are glutted right now, so that the oil companies can only sell the oil there at about $70 a barrel, which the market rate is give or take $100 a barrel now. But because those markets are glutted, they take a $30 hit. Right. So if the pipeline goes through all the way from Hardisty, Alberta to Port Arthur, Texas, those Midwestern refineries are no longer going to be glutted, so they'll have to pay the full market rate, right? So that's a 30% bump in prices that's going to translate at the gas pump, at the diesel pump for farmers who rely on it for their tractors and what have you, and also in heating oil. Now, I would advise any listeners in the Midwest to think about what it would be like to pay 30% more for their heating oil this winter.
No, absolutely. I'm from Nebraska originally. It gets quite cold out there.
Yeah. Now, that's lie number 2. Lie number 3 is that it's going to generate a lot of tax revenue for the U.S. That's just patently false. First off, the oil is taxed in the U.S. at the wellhead, right? At this point, there is no wellhead in the U.S. for Canadian tar sands oil. So it would, if it were to be taxed, it would be taxed on export, except this pipeline specifically goes to Port Arthur, Texas, and there's another offshoot that goes into Houston, but both of those are free trade zones, which means there is no export tax.
Wow.
Right. Surely there must be some taxation along the pipeline route, one would hope anyway, except, as our friends at Oil Change International reported on last year, the oil companies have been using something called a master limited partnership, which is just another form of incorporation, another legal fiction. But this one allows them to dodge taxes altogether. All right, so that the corporation itself pays very, very little in taxes. The shareholders pay very, very little in taxes. So it's a way that they might be able to get away with almost zero in taxes. So there's another lie for you.
Yeah. Again, I'm talking to Dave Saldana. He is the director of the new documentary that he made and wrote and directed for the Center for Media and Democracy Project, which is Keystone PipeLies Exposed. You can find the documentary and other action points at pipeliesexposed.org. There's a few more that we want to get to here. And then the next one on the list of giant lies of the Keystone Pipeline is the safety of the pipeline itself. And that one's another instance of it being a blatantly false statement when they talk about the safety. Tell us about that.
Yeah, a lot of claims have been made about how safe pipeline lines are, and the fact is, they're not. They just aren't. Now this Keystone XL segment goes from Hardisty, Alberta, to Steel City, Nebraska, where it connects with existing pipelines. Now, those existing pipelines have been there for a while already, and Keystone Phase 1, which was the first part put in, we were told it was going to leak maybe once every 7 years, as if that were a legitimate risk. In fact, during its first year of operation, it leaked 12 times. Right?
Wow. We've
got now a pipeline that if the XL extension goes through and is approved, it would transverse from eastern Montana down through the Dakotas, through Nebraska, Kansas, and then connect with existing pipeline in Oklahoma. Right? In that path exists the Ogallala Aquifer, which supplies about a third of our nation's fresh water. 8 states rely on it for drinking water. 8 million people rely on it for drinking water. Plus, there are also farms and ranches that rely on it for irrigating their crops and watering their livestock. Now, if the pipeline leaks into that, we're looking at a food catastrophe, right? Potential famine in the U.S. if that aquifer gets contaminated to the extent that farmers can no longer water their livestock or irrigate their crops. Not to mention the 8 million people who would have no drinking water.